Well, we're in week 5 of our first formational habit, abiding alone with God. And our bottom line for this week is abiding alone with God forms us even when we don't feel it.
Yeah, there's times in our life with God where we don't feel him there, or we don't experience the answers to our prayers that we're looking for, and that leaves us with a whole lot of stuff to work through, and sometimes we don't really know how to work through, but it turns out we're in good company. So one of the things that Julie and I experienced in our lives was when I was pastoring in Louisiana, one of our good friends came over to help us with a house project. And one minute he was out in the yard talking with my kids. The next minute he fell down and had a heart attack right on my driveway. I was doing CPR. The ambulance came. They got him going again. They took him to the hospital. We were praying like crazy. Julie says she's never prayed. I went to be with the family. She hit her knees and just prayed to God as fervently as she had prayed for anything. And it was just so disappointing for us when that prayer wasn't answered the way we wanted it. And, that was one of the hardest funerals I ever preached. Is just, obviously for a lot of reasons, but part of that reason was that we had so earnestly sought the Lord for this friend of ours, and it just hadn't worked out, and it's like, that's a lot to process and a lot of heaviness. So
Sure. And chances are we all can relate to that story in some way, that we are or have been in a season where it seems like our prayers are not getting through. Maybe there's even this idea that God is aloof or indifferent toward our situation. In fact, I think sometimes this very issue becomes one of the greatest things that prevents us from spending alone time with God, abiding, conversing with him, because we maybe are discouraged. We feel defeated maybe in the request, or we just, if we're honest, we don't necessarily feel that we have the permission to be authentic with God in what we're grappling with.
Yeah, so that's one of the things, hopefully, as you read Psalm 13 today, you saw one of the examples of people being really real with God and authentic with, it doesn't hide any of the anxiety or the doubts or the fears, the questions. Yeah, it's just, they lay it all out there time and again. So it's...
Yeah, what's interesting, Psalm 13 is known as a psalm of lament. And actually, over 1/3 of the Psalms recorded in Scripture are in that category, Psalms of Lament, which I think is really telling that over 33%, right, of these model prayers and worship songs are around this idea that life is really hard, that there's suffering, that there's overwhelming issues that don't make sense to us, that we can't justify or reconcile in our mind, that there is a sense sometimes that God is far off or is not present in the situation or coming to aid. And there's just an authenticity and an unfiltered nature almost in these prayers that in some strange way, hopefully we would draw encouragement from today, that even when we're in a place where we're not feeling it, so to speak, where it's really difficult, that ought not prevent us from conversing with God, from abiding alone with him. Actually, we have permission to go to him full.
Yeah.
Just with fully open.
All of our stuff and all the things that we're feeling, and one advantage that we have that I feel like, I admire the psalmists like David, their faith without seeing Jesus beforehand. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, for me, I feel like I can lean into this trust that, God does care. In spite of my suffering or in spite of what I see going on that is not getting answered or whatever, like I can believe that God cared because of what happened, what Jesus did for me. And not only that, I've seen that God cares enough to enter our suffering with us and to take all that on us And we see in Jesus such an example of even this kind of prayer,
Right.
of lament, as he went to the cross, and prayers that even weren't answered, in a sense. Absolutely. Of let this cup pass from me, and then we being willing to go through it. That's powerful. And so I admire the psalmist for being able to wade into these kinds of things, and at the end of it still come back around to hope and trust, even though they didn't have Jesus the way that we do.
Right. There's a sense in these Psalms of Lament, they're often structured that way, with a lot of authenticity, just transparent emotion and feeling that's not always even grounded in solid theology, really. That's like, it's just the full range of human emotion. But then it usually circles back around to an affirmation of who God is.
Yeah.
Even though I don't feel it, I believe that you're good. I believe that you're faithful. I'm going to choose, to believe that in the midst of this. And I think there's a sense in which sometimes we don't reach that place of healing in our relationship with God unless we're just really honest with him. And there's something about that. There is a psalm that says that he's near the brokenhearted and he binds up their wounds. And so when we lay our broken heart out before God with full transparency, I think it invites, and it's an invitation for him to come and begin binding that up and maybe leading us to that deeper affirmation of faith in the midst of suffering, the circling back around to, in Jesus' language, in his own lament, but not my will, your will be done.
Yeah. So even in seasons where we don't feel it, even in seasons where we're, practicing this abiding alone with God, we're spending our time alone with God, but we don't even feel like he's there. We don't even feel like we're getting anywhere, or that we're seeing the fruit. We continue to practice this faithfully with a trust that we see in Scripture and that we inherit from Jesus and from all the saints who've gone before us. And we just press on with this hope that he is faithful, he is good, he's proven it to us. So I'm going to stick with this habit, even when I don't feel it, and believing that on the other side of this season, I will experience fruit from it.
Yeah, and I don't have to be fake or put on a facade. I don't have to withdraw or avoid God's presence because I'm afraid of what I'm going to say, But lean into that. And I love the language you placed around that, like we're doing this in trust. And I think that's one of the things sometimes that we feel, whether we can really name it or not, is that to lament, to be that honest with God, is almost a failure of faith. When in reality, I think it's the opposite. It's pressing in the middle of doubt. And to me, that actually could be a pinnacle of faith.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think would be worth mentioning here that we haven't talked a lot about through this series at this point is the habit of journaling in our quiet time alone with the Lord. And I know for me personally, I think some of my most authentic moments with God have been with a pen in hand and just writing down my thoughts and just being real of, God, here's what's going on. Here's what I'm feeling. And just, I don't know why that is. And maybe that's just unique to me, but I don't think so. I know you do some journaling, so maybe you can speak into this too. It's just something about writing it out and just laying it there on paper before the Lord that has been helpful to me, and maybe it would be to some others.
Absolutely. I think there is something about that which even, kind of goes back to sometimes a counseling technique. If you are frustrated in a relationship or are harboring a resentment, and a counselor might encourage you to, write that letter out, like write it as though you would send it. Don't actually send it, just write it out. And there's something about that venting process that it's a form of confession, really, of just kind of laying something out in vulnerability. That is healing, or leads toward healing.
Yeah. So whether you're in a season right now where you're feeling this in a very personal way, or maybe it's something you can look back on and see, times in your life where you've gone through something like this. For some of our younger folks, it may just be something that okay, this is coming down the road. This has been like a universal experience of people who follow Jesus. Wherever you're at in this journey, feel free to be real with each other for a few minutes and just talk about where you've met this in your life or where you've seen it in the lives of others, and let's talk about how we can be a faithful people in this habit that we're trying to cultivate, even in the face of tough stuff.